This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Talking about slicing and dicing, I was just amazed this week that Hillary Clinton, who's out there doing her so-called book tour, whatever happened, or whatever she wants to call it, I guess something happened. It wasn't good for her. It was good for the country. But she made a reference to Donald Trump being like Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, and killing people. I mean, can you imagine that Hillary Clinton, someone who had 80 people vanish in and around the Clinton administration during those years? I know, because lists of dead people were left on the chairs of some of my clients. I had two whistleblowers out of the White House who revealed the first email scandal where the Clintons were hiding over 1 million email documenting their criminality, not just to Ken Starr, not just to Congress, but to Judicial Watch, which I founded and was running at the time, but also with regard to other individuals, such as Linda Tripp. Lists of dead people were left on the chair of Linda Tripp to try to intimidate her, not from testifying. Now, we know that the Clintons have a history of criminality. We know that it goes back decades. In fact, I filed a RICO case, that's a Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act case, down in Florida a number of years ago, and it was assigned, regrettably, to a Clinton judge who dismissed it, no surprise. Then it went up to the 11th Circuit, where they're all packed with leftist judges. But it was quite legitimate, this case. It was something that we did at Freedom Watch, because that's what we do. You see, we're your Justice Department. No Justice Department would have filed it, certainly not the Obama Justice Department. The current Justice Department of Attorney General Jeff Sessions has itself buried in the sand. It doesn't look any way which other than down like an ostrich, because Sessions is under investigation himself by Robert Mueller, and he doesn't want to rock the boat. But this is the kind of thing that the Clintons have been doing, and it's not just killing people. Of course, she didn't do it herself. She probably hired people to do it for her, because when 80 people die, most of them were material witnesses. It has to be a little bit more than the law of averages. And I got to tell you, I was deposing the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Harold Ickes, at one point during those years in the 90s, during the period of impeachment. And I asked him, because he was a lawyer in New York City. He had ties to a restaurant workers union, which was mafia. And I said, Harold, you were the lawyer of this labor union, weren't you? And he said, yeah. That's one of the few yes he ever gave during the deposition. And I said, well, you know that it's mafia connected. He didn't respond. I said, Harold, while you're in the White House, have you ever asked for any favors? And he got so upset that he took his microphone off as the deposition was occurring, threw it on the table, got up. I told the videographer to follow him. And what does he say? He says, I say, Mr. Ickes, where are you going? He's walking out of a deposition in the middle of the deposition. And he says in a Southern accent, of course, he's from the Bronx. Maybe he's from the South Bronx. He says, Mr. Clayman, I got to go to the restroom, because if I don't go to the restroom right now, I'm going to leave something on your floor. Well, these are the people that Hillary Clinton associated herself with and still does. Harold Ickes was instrumental in the last presidential bid, the failed bid of Hillary Clinton. And for Hillary Clinton to accuse President Trump of arranging to kill people, either presently or in the future, is the pot calling the kettle black. It's the ultimate hypocrisy. And this woman should have been indicted long ago by independent counsel Ken Starr, by independent counsel Robert Ray, who succeeded Starr during those Clinton years. The only reason that Ray didn't indict Clinton is because he felt that with an African-American Democrat jury in D.C., he couldn't get a conviction. But that was no reason not to do it. That was a cowardly act. So the moral to the story is this is why you need a Freedom Watch. We bring the cases that we can bring. We currently have a case against Hillary Clinton. We just filed a brief this week. You can see it at freedomwatchusa.org, and we need your strong moral and financial support. We're the mouse that roared. We're your Justice Department. This is over Benghazi because Hillary Clinton, using a private email server, gave up the coordinates of Ambassador Christopher Stevens and therefore gave up the coordinates of the people working with the ambassador in the consulate in Benghazi, Libya. And those people were the sons of two of our clients, Pat Smith, who you might remember from the Republican National Convention, and also Charles Woods. And their sons were Sean Smith and Ty Woods, and they were patriots, and they were killed. Therefore, we brought a case against Hillary Clinton on 2 counts. One, for wrongful death, because that can even occur negligently by using those email servers that were private, that were hacked, that contained classified information, that contained information about the whereabouts of the ambassador and people working with him in conjunction with the CIA, in conjunction with the State Department on secret missions. That's how the terrorists found out where Ty Woods and Sean Smith were, and that's why they were killed, sadly. Well, this case was assigned to you guessed it, Clinton-appointed judge. Excuse me, an Obama-appointed judge, which is even worse, frankly. And this judge dismissed the case on the eve of Memorial Day. Can you imagine, with Gold Star parents dismissing something on the eve of Memorial Day when they're grieving? It was totally a hacked decision. We're confident it's going to be reversed. I filed an appellate brief this week. There are valid grounds to go against Hillary Clinton. She has no immunity. You have no immunity when you're committing crimes, and we all know that her use of that private email server resulted, in the words of former Deputy Attorney General Rudy Giuliani and Mayor of New York, in at least 17 crimes. And not only that, we sued her for libel. We sued her for slander. We sued her for defamation because she called our clients liars. She at first told them that it was just the walk of a bunch of Muslims who were mad about a audio of the Prophet Muhammad. But that's not what it was about. It was actually about terrorists. It was about al-Qaeda. And in fact, she said that to the president of Egypt and to her daughter, Chelsea Clinton. Yet when our clients revealed what Hillary Clinton had said, the nonsense that she had said, the BS that she had said, that this was just because Muslims got upset over a video of the Prophet Muhammad criticizing him, she called our clients liars. Now, she didn't have immunity for that either because she was a private citizen at that time. So this is a very strong case. And you see, this is what we do at Freedom Watch. This is what separates me from other public interest groups and Freedom Watch. I founded Judicial Watch. I used to do this at Judicial Watch. Now it's Freedom Watch that's doing it. We're bringing the hard-hitting cases. We're becoming your Justice Department. And we are your Justice Department because we don't have a Justice Department. But I might add, I read an article just today that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been asked by Congress, we know that, of course, to appoint an independent counsel to look into the crimes of Hillary and Bill Clinton. He says he can't acknowledge what's going to happen, but ultimately they will respond. Well, don't count on that, because the sad part is, although Sessions is a very nice man and he has a nice demeanor about him, he also is a coward. He's a coward because he's under investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller unfairly for allegedly lying to Congress about meetings that he had with the Russian ambassador during the Trump campaign. And he's also under investigation for participating in firing James Comey. And that's why he recused himself ultimately, those 2 issues. Well, he's not going to do anything. He's done nothing for Cliven Bundy, and I'll get to that because I want to give you an update. That case is going to trial on October 10th. And I know we talk about it a lot, but this is a case that really concerns your future. It's super important for you. But don't hold your breath about Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He's done some good things with immigration. Courts have blocked him so far, but that's not his fault, and that's not the Justice Department's fault, although most of the lawyers there are Clinton loyalists, about 97%, and Obama loyalists, the so-called deep state. And, he said a few things recently about First Amendment rights on college campuses, but thus far the Justice Department's done nothing. But we really need to rise up as a people, and we're going to talk about it later in the show, too. We did rise up in Alabama this week when we elected, at least in terms of going into the general election, Chief Justice Roy Moore, someone who I think is a lot like me, and I'm going to talk about that because this man may be the only hope of any senator in the U.S. Congress that will actually ever do anything, because we've seen what's happened lately with regard to the Senate. They bailed out of Obamacare again. They can't pass anything. They're completely hapless. Mitch McConnell's over the hill. He can barely walk, notwithstanding the fact that he's an establishment hack. Then you've got over in the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, who looks like a cartoon character. I don't know how you can take the guy seriously. Everything is Pollyanna. Everything's great. But you know what? Nothing ever happens. And that's why, with regard to the conservative, grassroots Republican electorate these days, the Republican Congress is hated as much as Obama was hated, is hated as much as Clinton was hated, maybe even hated more, because we expect more from them. We expect more from our own. And while Freedom Watch is nonpartisan, I'm a registered Republican. I'm proud of being a Republican in the mold of Thomas Jefferson, but I'm not proud of being a Republican in the mold of the clowns that are up there on Capitol Hill today. It's an absolute disgrace. You know, when I come to Washington, I'm in Washington today, I don't even bother going up there anymore. I'd rather just sue them. In fact, that was my concept when I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2003 and 2004. I was going to take the concept of Judicial Watch inside of the U.S. Senate and, frankly, open up my own law firm there. We had over 100 people working for me as senator from Florida, but I didn't win. So I came out and I started Freedom Watch. And this is why we need to use whatever tools we can to bring about justice, to hold these people's feet to the fire, to make sure that the job will be done. But I hope that when Roy Moore, former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, is elected senator, that we'll have one friend in Congress. Because right now, conservatives have no friends in Congress. And anybody who claims they're a conservative and says they have a friend, frankly, is not a conservative, because there's nobody up there that really is. I don't care who you're talking about in the true sense of the word. So we have a great show today. We're going to come back. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight about what's going on in the Bundy trial. And it's super important. But go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. See what we're doing. We just don't regurgitate the news. We make the news.
Fearless.
This Clayman, he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to educate you more about what's going on out there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, Cliven Bundy is in the federal prison in Pahrump. That's quite far out of Las Vegas, Nevada. It's actually near Area 51, which is where we dropped the atom bomb leading up to the end of World War II. We also do a lot of secret military activities out there, so it's quite appropriate that they drop the atom bomb, because this case is the atom bomb. Let me tell you why. Cliven Bundy's family ranched the land in and around Bunkerville, Nevada, not far out of Las Vegas, not far from Bunkerville, for 150 years. His great-grandfather, his name was Levitt. Interestingly enough, that's a Jewish name. Mormons actually accept Jewish people as converts more quickly than they do Christians in many respects. Cliven's educated me over the years. Mormons believe that the Constitution is the equivalent of the Book of Mormon, and they believe that the United States is the promised land, even beyond Israel. They respect Israel and love Israel, but this is it for Mormons. Well, Cliven's family ranched this land, and of course he's ranching it now. And the way you get ranching rights, particularly in the West, is through usage. This is Property 101, which I took during law school. You get water rights, you get grazing rights, you get all these rights, but you don't really own the land. Of course, he owns the homestead in and around his house, but he ranches on hundreds of acres with about 500 heads of cattle. It was a successful operation. It's a very fine family. Cliven has 14 kids. He's got a lovely wife, Carol, and great grandchildren and dogs and the whole deal. I mean, it's the American dream. Well, he was just ranching the land, and all of a sudden along comes Bureau of Land Management many years ago, and they claimed, we're going to take over this land. We're going to take over administering to it. They don't ask permission. They just say, we're doing it. This is the federal government, the heavy-handed federal government, and we're going to charge you grazing fees for doing that. And Clayman says, I don't need you to take care of this land. I'm going to take care of this land. I love this land. So I'm not going to sign your contract and pay you grazing fees so you can extort money from me. In fact, the land doesn't belong to the federal government. It belongs to the state of Nevada. Now, this is an interesting thing, and it's much more complicated than we can do on this show. But ask yourself the question. The federal government claims 85% of the land in Nevada. Same thing in Utah. Same thing in Arizona. Well, how did they become states if they don't even own their own land? How are you a state if you don't own your land? And I can go through this at some other later show. Hopefully when Cliven gets acquitted, I'll bring him on. He's going to only get acquitted with your help because I'll tell you something, it's an uphill fight here. We've got a corrupt judge and we've got corrupt prosecutors in an Obama and Harry Reid courtroom. And that's what we're facing October 10th when we go to trial. But Cliven refused to do that. Instead, he wrote checks to the state of Nevada for the use of the land, which the state of Nevada returned. They're cowards in the state of Nevada. They don't stand up to the federal government. They roll over. You know, in that part of the world, money talks and nobody walks. Las Vegas and that area is not exactly Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. It's not exactly the Pope. It's not exactly a Protestant leader. It's somebody... People there that basically it's a mafia operation. That's what I'm basically saying. The state is that way, regrettably. So it's not honest, and frankly, the federal government's not honest. But Nevada owns the land. So anyway, eventually, the federal government decides they're going to enforce their claim of grazing fees, and they send these goons by the Bureau of Land Management into Cliven's property. Now, who was running the Bureau of Land Management at the time? You guessed it, the hand-picked former chief of staff of the most corrupt senator in modern history, Harry Reid, mafia-connected Harry Reid, the senator from Nevada. These goons threaten the lives of the Bundy family. When the Bundy family refuses to get off the land, when they refuse to relinquish their cattle, they beat the heck out of Cliven's sister Margaret. They throw her to the ground. They tase his two sons. He's got more sons than two, but two of them they were tased. They viciously kick and harm the family dog, and then they kill the bulls in the herd, which is, of course, you need to raise a herd to, create livestock that you can sell for your living. They kill them and bury them in a secret mass grave. Now, all of this is being televised, and it's over the social media at the time, and people from all over the country come to the defense of the Bundys, and some of them come using their Second Amendment rights armed. And what happens is a standoff. It's the federal government against peaceful protesters who just simply to be armed. Now, we come back, I'm going to tell you more about this story because it's an American story, and it's why we fought a revolution, and it's why we have a Declaration of Independence. I'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
So there you have it. The making of a standoff at the Bundy Ranch, like the standoff at the OK Corral, that famous movie. You had federal goons on one side sent by Harry Reid. And the reason they wanted to take over the land and claim the cattle is because Harry Reid and his lovely son, Rory Reid, also mafia connected from downtown Las Vegas, was trying to sell the land to Chinese environmental interests. And what would they probably get? Kickbacks. This is the way it works in Las Vegas. It works a lot around the country with regard to corrupt politicians. So you have the standoff, and these peaceful protesters come, and they're armed. Some of them are militia. In fact, the Second Amendment provides for militia. There's nothing wrong with being militia as long as you obey the law. They came because they saw that the Bundy family was having the crap beaten out of them, was subject to possibly being killed, and they didn't want to be killed themselves. They didn't bring the guns in an offensive way. It was a defensive way. Well, eventually, the government gave up. Eventually they left. The sheriff of Clark County told them they should leave to avoid any kind of issue, whether it was bloodshed or whatever. His name was Sheriff Gillespie. In fact, we're looking for him right now because he'd be a great witness for Cliven. But this is a situation here that is exactly what occurred in the years leading up to the American Revolution, where King George was busting into people's homes, stealing property, beating up families, raping women, his goons that he sent to the United States. And it's why we have a Declaration of Independence. It's why we fought the American Revolution. And it's why we have a country. So here we come, 200 plus years later. The same thing's happening to the Bundys and ranchers in Nevada, in Utah, and other places. You know, these heavy-handed tactics of the Bureau of Land Management and the federal government has driven hundreds of ranchers out of business. And one of the pretexts were so-called environmental regulations, which are bogus, other than claiming land for purposes that Harry Reid wants it and his son wanted to make a profit, is this bogus excuse that you have to save the desert tortoise, a turtle, okay, because cattle were supposedly harming the turtle. Well, they don't harm the turtle. In fact, the turtle eats the cow manure. They like the cows. They like the cattle. But in any event, this is what happened, and the federal government eventually left. Now, after the standoff was over, Cliven gave a press conference. He gave an interview in the New York Times. He gave a press conference on his property. And people were trying to understand how he felt. And he said, you know, I feel like the Negro in the Old South. I feel like the government has done this to me, has wronged me. Now, he didn't know the politically correct word to use. And in fact, there's nothing wrong with the word Negro. In fact, it was used by Martin Luther King to describe his people. It's a legitimate word. In many ways, it's less offensive than the word black, and there's nothing offensive about any of it, no more than calling a white person white. But President Obama, who was in office at the time, took offense. And there was a White House Correspondents' Dinner just a few weeks later. And Cliven was very, very popular with the conservative crowd, Senator Rand Paul and others. But when a media outrage occurred, thanks to the left-wing media that condemned Cliven for using the word Negro, that's a Freudian slip, everybody ran away from him. So Obama's up there on the dais, and you can find this video at ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org, ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Please donate to Cliven's cause, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But you can also see the video. President Obama gets up there and says, I see Senator Paul sitting in front of me. I understood he invited that Nevada rancher to the Correspondents' Dinner. I guess he got disinvited. And then Obama adds, and I'm paraphrasing, let this be as a warning to anyone who starts a sentence, let me tell you about the Negro. And he repeats that. It was a threat to Cliven. Now, a couple years later, nothing happens for a couple years. Federal government is off the land, nothing happens. A couple years later, a rancher in Oregon is also being persecuted, much like the Bundy family. And the Bundy sons, who are equally as righteous and pious as Cliven, really a fine family, they go out there to assist in a peaceful protest. But, of course, they know the Bureau of Land Management. They know how violent it is. And they're armed, Second Amendment rights. Well, federal agents come in when they were occupying a game reserve, just peacefully protesting. And an FBI agent who was part of that gang, the federal gang, shoots someone in cold blood that is protesting. Lavoy Finicum, you probably heard of that, shot him in cold blood. But rather than prosecuting the FBI agent, who now is under investigation because it came out that he lied under oath about what happened that day, they wind up indicting Cliven's sons and others out there at that protest. Cliven then goes out to visit his sons in Oregon because he's concerned, and they arrest Cliven as well at the airport in Portland, Oregon. And they indict him and 18 others, including his sons, not just for what happened in Nevada, but the sons for also what happened in Oregon. Well, there eventually was a trial in Oregon, and the sons essentially represented themselves, and they were acquitted because the jury just didn't buy this heavy-handedness, this use of excessive force by the federal government. But it gave rise to a trial as well in Nevada, an indictment. And the case was assigned to the chief judge of the District of Nevada, Gloria Navarro. who is the hand-picked disciple, you guessed it, of Senator Harry Reid, appointed by Barack Obama, chief judge. She also went to law school in Maricopa County, Arizona State, and I'll explain why that's important. But when Cliven's indicted and when he's brought back with some of the other defendants, he's thrown in prison. He's thrown in solitary confinement. Can you believe that? Didn't harm a hair on anybody. The Bundy family's never hurt anybody. The judge threw him in solitary confinement. And then the government says that it's a complicated case, and I use the word government loosely. These are Obama prosecutors in the District of Nevada. The U.S. Attorney, acting U.S. Attorney, is Stephen Myra. He hopes to be appointed permanently by Trump, but I've done whatever I can to prevent that. I hope it never happens. But they asked the judge to waive the Speedy Trial Act. That requires that you go to trial within 60 days. You just can't hold people forever. Well, the judge overrides the Speedy Trial Act and keeps all these people in prison. Cliven's now been in prison for 1 year and 7 months, along with his sons. I then seek to come into the case pro hac vice because Cliven wanted me to be his lawyer. I was recommended to him, and it's good to have somebody from outside of Nevada because a lot of these local lawyers get court appointments to that's how they get business from the same judges. So they're very reticent to take strong positions with these judges. It's better to have somebody out of state who isn't dependent on his legal livelihood for Las Vegas legal community or Nevada. Judge denies me pro hac vice entrance, and I then take an appeal of that. And to this day, I'm still fighting that. I'm up at the Supreme Court right now. I'm going to participate in this trial one way or the other. I'm going to be there at least in an advisory capacity, assisting the local counsel, whoever that may be, and I'll explain that in a second. But you cannot keep a lawyer out from representing a criminal defendant unless he's at the point of disbarment, a totally illegal ruling by Judge Navarro. And not only that, throughout this case, she's made a number of other illegal rulings. She's excluding evidence of the intent of the people coming to the aid to peacefully protest for the Bundys at the ranch. She's excluding evidence of why Cliven didn't feel that he did anything wrong by claiming the land when the Bureau of Land Management tried to take it away from him and was attempting to seize his cattle upon court order, because he believed that the land belonged to Nevada, and therefore it was the federal government that was trespassing. This judge is not going to allow that evidence into trial. The only evidence that she's going to let into trial is whether or not the people that came to protest what had happened there, and remember, the Bundys weren't even armed. It was just these other people who came. Whether or not they pointed guns in the direction of the federal agents. Well, if the federal agents are threatening you, don't you have a right under the Second Amendment to defend yourself? And that's, in fact, what happened. They didn't fire any shots. This is all manipulated. In fact, I have 2 clients that were acquitted already in prior trials that are related to Cliven's case. They didn't even present any evidence. The jury saw through it and acquitted them. But Cliven's at risk because he is the linchpin. He's the big head. They want the big kahuna. They want his head on a stick because American citizens should not stand up to the federal government. We should just roll over like pussycats. We should do whatever the federal government wants and not say anything, and particularly a federal government that at the time was being run by Obama and also by Harry Reid. And in fact, we know that the deep state's still there in every aspect of the government. This case is not being tried by people loyal to President Trump that he's put in charge at the Justice Department. It's being tried by individuals who are holdovers from the Obama administration. And this is my criticism of Attorney General Jeff Sessions because I talked to him months ago. I have his cell phone number. I called him on the phone. He called me back. I left a message. I asked him, Jeff, will you please look at this case neutrally? I'm not telling you what to do, but this is an injustice. This is a political prosecution. He said, Larry, I'll do that as soon as the Deputy Attorney General has confirmed Rod Rosenstein. Well, he never did it. And instead of doing it, he was in Nevada making a speech about sanctuary cities about a month and a half ago. And I asked the scheduler, I said, can I have 15 minutes with the Attorney General? Because I wanted to focus him on it. I hoped that maybe the case would be dismissed before Cliven would come to trial. And I got a response, sorry, he's busy, he can't meet. Well, he gives a little speech out there where he says that he's supporting the courage of the prosecutors. These prosecutors are not courageous. They have violated virtually every rule of professional ethics for lawyers. And Judge Navarro rubber stamps everything that they want. And Sessions then gives a statement, even though he's there praising the prosecutors. He says, but I'm not taking sides. Well, who ever heard of an attorney general that doesn't take sides? He's the head of the department. The buck stops on his desk. So here's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. We're going into a trial on October 10th. This case is going to be very, very expensive. It's going to take 2 to 3 months to try. We need your very strong financial support. This is a private legal defense fund. Go to clivenbundydefensefund.org, clivenbundydefensefund.org. Please contribute. I'm trying to bring Congressman Bob Barr, who worked with me on the Clinton impeachment, into the case. I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will order me to participate as counsel of record. If not, I'll be participating anyway. And Cliven just this week said he doesn't want his local counsel anymore because his local counsel hasn't done much in this case, and he won't push the issue of who owns the land. So, and this is public, he said that to a magistrate who denied him new counsel. So we really need to make a full court press. We really need to rise up for Cliven because, you see, if this can happen to him, this can happen to you. Ask yourself the question. If you owed the Internal Revenue Service a lot of money, and Cliven maintains he doesn't owe the federal government anything, does that give them the right to bust into your house, to beat up your sister, to tase your sons, to kick your dogs, to kill your cattle or kill anything else, and go off scot-free? Is that the United States of America? Can we have that in this country? No. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most important case that I've ever had because it goes right back to the days of the American Revolution and what occurred in my native city of Philadelphia with the Declaration of Independence, throwing the yoke of tyranny off the backs of the colonialists. We need to take the yoke of tyranny off our back, and we can see that this Obama deep state is even now trying to destroy President Trump. Perhaps our one hope as a president to get this country back on track. And that's why I've been kind of like, even though he never asked me and I don't do anything, by agreement, I do it because I think it's right at Freedom Watch. It's why we are, in effect, Trump's Justice Department. He doesn't have one in Attorney General Sessions. In fact, Sessions wound up through Deputy Rosenstein and putting the administration in entire jeopardy with this ridiculous investigation of Russian collusion. So please go to clivenbundydefensefund.org. Cliven is C-L-I-V-E-N, Bundy, B-U-N-D-Y, defensefund.org. Please contribute because I'm going to be there for 2 to 3 months, and I hope to bring Bob Barr in. This is very costly, and we need to defend Cliven because by doing that, we are preserving the freedom for you in our great nation. I'm going to be right back. We're going to talk about other positive developments, not so sad, that occurred this week.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Let's talk of a positive development this week. That's the election in effect, because he will be elected senator from Alabama, of Chief Justice Roy Moore. Years ago, a fellow evangelical, Ed McAteer, suggested that Judge Moore and I go to Israel, go to Mount Sinai, and we both walk down with the Ten Commandments. Of course, you know that Judge Moore is the Ten Commandments judge. He put the Ten Commandments in his courtroom. He refused to take them out. In fact, the Ten Commandments are right over the bench in the Supreme Court. It's the basis of our legal system, is the Ten Commandments, whether you're Christian, Jewish, or whatever. There's no doubt that are the fundamental tenets of our judicial and legal system. And Judge Moore stood on principle, and he was impeached. He then ran for Chief Justice. He was elected, and he stood on principle again when the Supreme Court issued an illegal decision on gay marriage. Now, we have all gay friends, okay? Gay people are generally very nice people, like the rest of society. They deserve to have rights. We don't take that away from them. and we must respect them. But on the other side of the coin, there's nothing in the Constitution that provides for gay marriage. It's not a constitutional right. It's a right for state legislatures if they decide that that's appropriate. It may be against Christian dogma and Jewish dogma, but on the other hand, if that's what state legislatures decide, that's the way it goes. But they didn't. The Supreme Court imposed it on the United States, and Moore resisted that, and he lost his position as chief judge. And I wrote a column this week for Newsmax. I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org and read that, freedomwatchusa.org, because I have a lot of kinship with Judge Moore. In fact, we had him on this show a few shows ago, is that Moore's like me. He doesn't worry about winning or losing. He does what he thinks is right. And if you do your best, you leave it in God's hands as to what's going to happen. And in fact, he said that about this election because he left it in God's hands. Everybody was against him. President Trump was deceived. He went along with the Mitch McConnells and the Karl Roves and pushed for the opponent to Moore. And Moore still won. The people rose up and they voted for him even in greater numbers because the people understood. And now President Trump understands that we have to preserve our country through the grassroots, through the Tea Party movement. People said I was the Tea Party before the Tea Party existed. After I wrote my book, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, there was a book review in Red State that said that, because we have to get down to street level. We have to be like the colonialists were. We have to be like the pitchfork rebellion that Patrick Buchanan talked about. We have to take the country back. These establishment politicians aren't going to do it. So this was positive news this week that Judge Moore got through the Republican primary, and he will undoubtedly win the general election and become the next senator from Alabama. He may be the only one that we can work with up there. There's nobody else that we can. They're all really into themselves. They walk around with their cufflinks and pins, $3,000 suits, but they pay little attention to what the people want. And, of course, we've seen the Republican Congress falling flat on its face, failing at everything it attempts. The last example is Obamacare. And, of course, they've been relatively silent about what's going on with the NFL and going down on knees these days. They're a bunch of cowards. Call them a racist, and they'll run for the nearest exit. So this is why you need a Freedom Watch and you need a Larry Klayman, if I may toot my own horn. And I want you to go to our website as well, because you can order a pre-publication version of my new book, Essays of a Madman. Not madman, one word, but two words, because I have been mad and I'm still mad, and I know you're mad too. And it chronicles the Clinton years, the Bush years, the Obama years, and now the Trump years. And if you read these essays, you'll see how far the country has sunk, and you'll see hope of how we can bring it back to the vision of our founding fathers. So go and purchase that book for a contribution of over $100 to Freedom Watch. You'll get the book for free. You can also purchase it outright. It's 4 volumes. It's 400 essays over the years, actually more, that I wrote for various publications. It's very important that we educate ourselves. You know, one of the reasons for the American Revolution was the printing press. That was the biggest, most powerful weapon that the colonialists had. And I think today the printing press is still the most powerful weapon to educate the people. And that's what we do every week here at Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Even though we don't just regurgitate the news but make the news, it's an educational experience. And I want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in every week. We'll be back next week with a very hard-hitting version of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Today I'm in Washington. Who knows where I'll be next week, but on October 10th I'm going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, defending Cliven Bundy. God bless.